This is a tutorial for the Sunflower Squish crochet along blanket. You can make this blanket in any size yarn or hook, but I used Yarnsmiths Snug as a bug, which is a super chunky chenille yarn and a 7mm hook. I've put all the information you need to make the blanket down in the description, such as yarn requirements, blanket sizes, information about the crochet along, as well as links to the yarn pack and the written pattern. Let's get crocheting a sunflower granny square. We're going to start our sunflower square with a magic ring. I usually recommend doing a double magic ring like this, however this is virtually impossible with chenille type yarn, so we're going to make our magic ring a little bit differently. So take your yarn tail and wrap it around your first 2 fingers twice like this, and use your ring finger next to your middle finger just to keep that tail in place so it's not going anywhere. I'm then going to take my crochet hook and put it under that first wrap, grab the second wrap with my hook and pull it under that first wrap. We can then gently remove our magic ring from our fingers, and this is what it's looking like. We're now ready to start round 1. We're going to start round 1 with a chain of 1. This does not count as a stitch. We're going to ignore it from now on. We're now going to make 12 half double crochet into that magic ring. That's half double crochet in US terminology. So a quick reminder of half double crochet. We yarn over, put our hook into the magic ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on our hook. And we're going to repeat that around 12 times into the magic ring. So meet me back at the end of this round once you've got your 12 half double crochet. So I've made my 12 half double crochet into my magic ring, and I'm now going to close my magic ring. So be really careful here and don't pull on this yarn tail too hard when you're closing that magic ring, because your yarn can snap just like the first time I tried to film this tutorial. So instead what I like to do is use my fingers to hold my crochet in place and then gently pull on that yarn tail bit by bit just to close up that magic ring. So it took a little bit of time and lots of gentle pulls, and now my magic ring is closed. So to finish off round 1, we need to make a slip stitch into our very first half double crochet. So in just there, it's a little hard to see on the chenille yarn. I'm just going to make a slip stitch. So we're going to start round 2 with a chain of 1. This does not count as a stitch again. We're now going to work 2 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around, including that one we just slipped into. So my slip stitch is there, so I'm going to make 2 half double crochets into that stitch. And then 2 half double crochets into the next stitch, and you're going to repeat this all the way around until you've got 24 half double crochets, and I'll meet you back at the end of this round. So I've finished my 24 half double crochets. I do recommend you definitely check your stitch count at the end of this round, because if you've got the wrong number of stitches, your sunflower will have the wrong number of petals. I'm also at the end of my yarn ball, so I've got a very small tail. Please cut your tails longer than this. So to finish off, we're going to make a slip stitch into that very first stitch, and then I'm going to pull that yarn tail through that slip stitch to fasten off, and then give that a gentle pull just to cinch those 2 ends together. So that is rounds 1 and 2 finished. We're now going to make our sunflower petals. So we're now going to join our yellow yarn to start round 3. So I'm going to put my crochet hook into any stitch, lay my yarn tail across my crochet hook like this, grab that loop and pull it through, and our yellow yarn is now joined, ready for round 3. So our first petal is worked a little bit differently to the other petals. So to make our first petal, you need to start with a chain of 3, and then into the next stitch we're going to make a 2 treble crochet cluster. So to do this, yarn over twice, then put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. We've now got 4 loops on our hook, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So we're not going to finish off this stitch, so I've left 2 loops on my hook. This here is called a partial treble crochet. We're going to make another partial treble crochet into that same stitch. So I'm going to yarn over twice, then put my hook back into that same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. I've now got 5 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over and pull through 2. I've now got 3 loops on my hook. To finish off our petal, we're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook, and that is our first petal made. We're now going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to make another petal across the next 2 stitches. So we're going to end up with 12 petals overall, and each petal covers 2 stitches. So we've got 24 on round 2, and we're going to have 12 petals on round 3. So to make the rest of your petals, you need to yarn over twice, and then we're going to put the hook into our next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So I've made a partial treble crochet into the next stitch. I'm now going to make 2 more partial treble crochets into the next stitch. So yarn over twice, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And again, yarn over twice. This time put your hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. I've got 6 loops on my hook at this point. It feels quite tight, but don't worry. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I've now got 4 loops on my hook. So I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on my hook. So these petals are a 3 treble crochet because I've got 1, 2, 3 stitches. So they're a 3 treble crochet cluster because we finished off those 3 stitches all at the same time to bring them together into a point for the top of our petal. But this 3 double crochet cluster is actually worked over 2 stitches. So if you can see, our first petal we've got 1 and then 2 stitches, and our second petal we've got 1 and then 2 stitches into the next stitch. So we're going to repeat this. So let's make another petal. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. We're now going to make another petal over the next 2 stitches. So yarn over twice, put your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and now I'm going to make 2 more partial trebles into the next stitch, not that same stitch. So yarn over twice, put your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and again yarn over twice, put your hook back into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We've now got 4 loops on our hook, so I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on our hook. So you now need to repeat these steps all the way around until you've got 12 petals and 12 chain 3 spaces, and I will meet you back at the end of this round to fasten off. So I've finished making my 12 petals. You can see how big this granny square is going to be. At this point it doesn't fit on the screen anymore. So I've just done my last chain 3, and then I'm going to do a slip stitch into the top of that last petal just to fasten off. And then I'm going to snip my yarn tail and use my crochet hook to pull it through that slip stitch. So we've now finished round 3 and on to the 4th and final round. So round 4, you're only going to be crocheting into these chain 3 spaces. So pick any one of these spaces and put your hook into it, then lay your yarn tail across your hook and pull up a loop to join that white yarn. I'm now going to make a chain of 3, 1, 2, 3, and this counts as my first double crochet stitch. And then I'm going to make 2 more double crochets into that same space. So into the next space we're going to make 4 half double crochets. So that's 1 half double crochet, 2 half double crochets and 3 and 4. It's a lot slower working with this chenille yarn over normal yarn. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the next space we're going to make 5. There's different number of stitches because this gives us a straight edge. If they both had 4, it curls in, and if they both had 5, it's too big. So yeah, one has 4 and one has 5. So yeah, anyway, we make 5 half double crochets into the next space, and I will speed this one up a little bit. So I've made my 5 half double crochet into that group. So I'm now going to make a corner group into this next space, and that consists of 3 double crochets, not half double crochets, double crochets. So 3 doubles, 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to chain 1 to make a corner space. If you prefer using a joining method that needs 2 chains, just do 2 chains here. I'm going to be using whip stitch, so that looks better with just 1 chain in the corner. Then I'm going to do 3 more double crochets back into that same space to make the corner. So there's my 3 double crochet, so my corner group, 3 double crochet, chain 1, 3 double crochet. So we're going to repeat this all the way around, first doing 4 half double crochet, 5 half double crochet, and then a corner group. So in the next space we'd be doing 4 half double crochet, then 5 half double crochet, and then a corner group all the way around. And I'll meet you back at this final corner to fasten off together. So I've continued on with round 3, and I'm just about to finish off this last corner. I've zoomed out a little bit so you can see the whole square because it is pretty huge at this point. So to finish off this corner, I'm going to make 3 more double crochet back into that space that we started in. And then I'm going to chain 1, and you can slip stitch to join here if you want to, but I'm actually going to be doing an invisible join because that's what I recommend in the pattern. So I'm going to cut my yarn tail approximately 3 times the length of one of the sides of the square. So quite a long tail because we're going to be using this tail to sew our squares together. And then I'm going to take my crochet hook and pull that really long yarn tail through that chain 1, and then I'm going to thread that tail onto a large blunt tapestry needle. Mine's a little bit bent, but it still works fine. And then we're going to do an invisible join. So to do an invisible join, I'll just bring this a little bit closer. So I'm going to take my yarn needle and I'm going to put it underneath both loops of the double crochet stitch that's next to my starting chain here. And then I'm going to put my yarn needle through the back loop only of that chain 1 we just made in the corner. And then I'm going to leave this tail loose. So I have a longer tutorial on the invisible join if you want to see that. I'll link it up here. So now I've done my invisible join, you can, if you want to, just tie a small knot with your yarn at the back just to stabilize it if you want the extra security, but I didn't bother with my blanket. So you now need to weave in all of your ends apart from that extra long one right at the end, and you weave your ends in with chenille yarn just like you normally would with any other yarn. Now if you've bought the yarn pack, you should have enough yarn to make 24 or 25 squares depending on what size you want your blanket to be, but if you're using another yarn, then make as many squares as you want to form your blanket. And then the next step, I'm going to show you how to sew your squares together. So it wasn't very clear when I was doing the join with the big squares. So what I've done is I've whipped up a few squares in a smaller weight yarn to show you the join. So let's learn how to join our squares together. So we're first going to join our squares into strips for the rows and then sew those strips together with a stitch called whip stitch. I do have a separate tutorial on this stitch if you need it, but I am going to go through it in this tutorial. So I'm going to thread that long yarn tail that we left onto a tapestry needle. And then I'm going to hold the 2 squares that I want to join together with the wrong sides facing outwards, so right sides together. So So starting in the corners with that single chain that we made in that corner, I'm going to put my yarn needle under both loops of that chain and then again through both loops of the chain of that stitch as well. So I've gone through 4 loops total. Then I'm going to pull that yarn tail through. I'm going to pull it so it's snug but it's not super tight. And then I'm going to repeat this all the way along, going under both loops of each stitch and pulling that yarn through on every stitch. So this is called whip stitch. I do have a more detailed tutorial on it if you need it. I'll link up in the top corner. So continue doing this all the way along both sides of your square until you reach this end. So I've reached that final corner and my last stitch is going to go through those corner chains again. And then after I've done this stitch, what I like to do is just tie a really simple knot just to secure that join down. So I'm going to put my needle through any loop, and then I'm going to put my needle back through that loop that we've just made, and that just keeps that yarn a little bit more stable. We can then work that yarn back down this stitch here and weave that end in. So once you've sewn all of your squares into strips, we're now going to sew those strips together into the blanket. So we're going to cut a new piece of white yarn, and the piece of white yarn needs to be approximately twice the length of the seam you're planning to sew, plus an extra 12 inches for weaving 2 ends in. So mine's actually worked out about 3 times, but yeah, twice as long with an extra 12 inches. Be generous here because you don't want to run out of yarn whilst you're sewing your blanket together. So let's zoom in and sew these together. So I'm going to place my strips wrong sides out, so right sides together, just like we did previously. So we're going to start in that corner chain like we did previously, but we've got a loose bit of yarn here, so we need to secure it on that first stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that first stitch under both loops of both chains, just like we did before. I'm going to pull my yarn through until I've left a long enough tail for weaving in, and then I'm going to tie that yarn tail in a knot with itself, just to give us something to pull against as we're joining. Once we've finished our join, we can go back and weave this tail in. So now we can join our squares together just like we did previously, going under both loops of both stitches of both squares all the way along. And I'm going to meet you back at this very first corner and I'll show you what we do to get a really neat join here. The rest of the join is exactly the same as we've done previously. So I've whip stitched all the way along these 2 squares, and my next stitch is actually the chain of this corner, but we've already stitched into that chain. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to stitch into that chain again, because this gives us a really neat join when we're whip stitching. So here is the first chain, well, the only chain of this corner of this first square in front of us, and I'm going to go under both loops. I've already stitched through this previously. And then I'm going to find the chain from the square at the back and do exactly the same and stitch through. We're then going to move on to joining these 2 squares. We've finished joining these squares now, and our first stitch is going to be through that chain that's already got a stitch in it. So we're going through that chain again and through that next chain again. And then you're going to keep whip stitching along until you reach the end of your strip of squares, and then we're going to tie off over here. So I've finished whip stitching along my strip, and my final stitch is through those last chains. I'm going to do exactly what I did at the end of when we were just joining 2 squares together and make a little looped knot just to secure that tail, and then we can weave our ends in, and it's time to add the border to the blanket. So we're going to start the border in one corner of the blanket, so not a corner of a square, the corner of the blanket, and into that chain space. So I'm going to put my hook into that chain space, lay my yarn tail across the top of my hook and pull that loop through to join in some fresh white yarn. So I'm now going to chain 1, and that doesn't count as a stitch. And the first round of our border, so there's 2 rounds total, the first round of our border is half double crochet. So into this corner chain 1 space, we're going to work 3 half double crochet, 2, 3, and I'm only working 3 half double crochet into this corner space because this gives us a lovely rounded corner. So now you need to half double crochet in every stitch across this square until we reach that join between two squares here, and I'll show you what we're doing here. So I've half double crocheted along this side of the square, and my next stitch is actually that corner chain space. So what we're going to do to navigate this is I'm going to work 1 half double crochet into that first corner space, and then we're going to skip over to the next square and work half double crochet into the next corner space. And you need to continue like this along the side of the blanket, working 1 half double crochet into each stitch and those corner spaces until you reach the next corner. So I'm now at the next corner of my blanket, and into that chain 1 space I'm going to work 3 half double crochet. 1, 2, 3. So along the side of your blanket you should have 15 half double crochet in the stitches along the side of the square. You should then have 1 half double crochet into the corner spaces that are joined together, and into the 4 corners of your square you should have just 3 half double crochet, just to give a nice rounded corner to this blanket. As you can see, the way that these squares are made, it makes this beautiful sort of scallop with the edge of the squares. So continue those steps all the way around until you end up back at your first corner, and then I'll show you the final round of the blanket. So I've finished making my half double crochet round 1, and now I'm going to slip stitch into that very first half double crochet to finish off this round. So we're now ready to start the final round of our blanket. We're going to make a chain 1 to start, that does not count as a stitch, and then our final round is actually going to be a stitch called crab stitch or reverse single crochet. I am going to go through this stitch if you've not heard of it before. If you find this stitch a little bit tricky though, feel free to just do single crochet, normal single crochet instead. So to work reverse single crochet, so usually when we crochet as a right-handed crocheter, we crochet from right to left, so we work that way along our stitches. With reverse single crochet, we're actually going to work this way along our stitches, so from left to right, and that means that our single crochet stitches twist a little bit, and that gives us a beautiful border. So make sure you do this stitch quite loosely, go up a hook size if you feel like you need to. So I'm going to put my hook into the next stitch to the right of that starting chain, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. Now you need to be really loose when you pull up this loop. Can you see how far I've pulled up that loop? Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. So that was our first reverse single crochet. So now I'm going to repeat that again. So I'm going to put my hook into the next stitch to the right, yarn over and pull up a loop, quite a long loose loop, yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. And again, I'm going to put my hook into the next stitch to the right. I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop quite loosely. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops on my hook. So I'm going to put my hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop quite loosely, then yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. So you can see how it's made this sort of twisted, almost cabled edging here. So do that reverse single crochet into every stitch around your blanket, and then I'll meet you back at this corner and I'll show you a way of fastening off with this stitch. So I finished working a reverse single crochet into every stitch around, and now I'm going to cut my yarn tail, and then I'm going to use my hook to pull that yarn tail through that final stitch, and then you can see that this stitch is kind of up in the air a little bit. So what I like to do is put my hook into my first stitch, grab my yarn tail and pull that tail through, and that sort of zips up that join there. So now you just need to weave your ends in and your blanket is finished. I hope you have enjoyed making your sunflower squish blanket, and if you'd like to support what I do here at Mima Makes, please consider buying the written pattern or even just giving this video a thumbs up. See you next time.